Hello and welcome to Conversations Over. This week, Conversation Over Podcasts. I'm Garrett.
And I am the co-host, Tyler. I'm the main host. He's the co-host.
The idea that we're co-hosts kind of circumvents any idea that one might be more important than the other.
But we all know it's me. Leave your opinions in the comments.
Who's going to comment? Mom and Dad?
Hopefully no one ever finds this.
Well, I guess that's the intro then.
This is our little audio journal.
It sure is. This week, hopefully we'll be discussing the idea of podcasts, where they came from, what they were before they were podcasts, who decided they were worthy media, and what makes a podcast a podcast.
I feel like we're also going to talk about why we decided to make a podcast and if this is our first podcast or not.
We will definitely be talking about that, except maybe that last bit.
The answer is no. We tried earlier. It didn't go well.
Yeah, it's a resounding no, in fact. We tried this once before. It's a very loose template that we didn't even follow. So hopefully this week, that is not what's going to happen.
Yeah, you can look for it, but you'll never find it.
I don't think I could find it at this point. It's on an old laptop somewhere.
As long as it's not in the cloud, they'll steal it.
Yeah, I didn't put it in the cloud. I saw that movie. Sex Tape?
Yeah, it's got Marshall from How I Met Your Mother, right?
Yeah, he's got a funky name. What's his name?
I have no idea.
It's really cool sounding.
This is not on topic.
Apparently there's also a Marshall in Paw Patrol. Jason Segel or Seagal.
Oh, Jason Segel. Gotcha.
Yes. Told you
I've heard the name before. He's definitely famous. All right, back on podcasts. What is a podcast? Let's talk about that first.
All right, so a podcast is a relatively new concept in mainstream media. We've seen them become more popular, especially during the time of the quarantine of 2020. In fact, Amazon briefly ran out of podcast microphones, interestingly. But the idea itself, uploading files in order to have listeners through a sort of broadcasting standpoint, is not as new as the term itself. Podcasting as a term didn't actually come out until 2004. It was really started its mainstream life. But before that, audio blogs date back as far as 1980, in fact, and have always been a popular way for people to reach out and talk to an audience.
But did you have pulled up somewhere?
I did this research beforehand, but I am also referencing my sites.
That's I didn't think we were going to be that legit about this. I was going to talk about what I think a podcast is, not what Merriam-Webster think it is.
Well, that's the angle of Conversations Over, and I'm glad you brought that up, is that every week one of us will be someone who's actually looked into it, done a little bit of research, and the other will pose the questions, bring up the ideas that they feel need to be brought up. And
okay,
that's how I see this going through in the future.
That makes a lot of sense, I guess. So there's one air quote expert, and the other is just there.
Right, one armchair expert against the guy who just wants some information and wants to throw some bullshit out.
Because to me, a podcast is it's another form of entertainment. It's just a media based in sound. Whereas I feel like a lot of media was based in visuals first.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the first movies were silent films. I feel like podcasts are the opposite of a silent film.
It's a radio drama.
Yes. We're back in the radio era.
The only important difference between radio dramas and podcasts being, theoretically, you can download a podcast at any time and listen to it.
Because this is the 21st century and you can download anything you want.
Exactly.
Even movies. It's illegal, but you can do it.
It's not always illegal. You can buy a digital movie.
But a lot of people don't. They just pirate the stuff.
That's true. That's illegal.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
A nice little awkward silence gap that's going to get filled in with editing, so I didn't have to bring it up. Followed by another one. Is the Zoom call still going?
Yes, the Zoom call is still going. I was.
All right.
Because I'm gonna edit this out, I'll tell you. I was looking to see what today's Unis Honest video was, and it started playing the intro video, and I had to silence it.
Today's Unis Honest is about using the Force, I think.
Yes, it is.
I had it started before we hopped on here.
Okay. We can get back on topic whenever you want to pose a question.
Alright, so I would just like to point out, because this is a podcast about podcasts, this first episode, the way we're doing it is kind of unique. We're doing like a Zoom chat so we can hear each other, and then we're both separately recording audio, which, due to COVID, a lot of like co-hosted podcasts have taken this approach in some way. They have a chat going and then they both record audio separately. And it's definitely a unique experience with lots and lots of hiccups along the way.
I'm not really sure why you brought that up.
So edit it out, who gives a shit?
I kept waiting for you to get to whatever point that ended in. But I guess it didn't end in one. So, to get back on topic a little bit, we can start to discuss why we decided a podcast was a good idea, a good way to spend our time, or we can get a little bit more into the facts if you are interested in that at all.
Alright, so I guess my first question for you, Mr. Podcast Expert, is what made us decide to start a podcast? Because this was your idea.
That's okay. That's a good question to have and a good one to address early, I think. And I personally have always thought it would be enlightening and entertaining, at least for myself, to attempt to make a podcast. I don't know how far this will go. I don't know if we'll get traction. I don't know if we'll get listeners. But I think the experience is nice, and personally, it's something to commit to. And I think that could be an interesting way to spend my time. Why did you agree to co-host?
Well, first and foremost, it was to support you. I feel like doing a podcast by yourself is a lot harder than doing a podcast with someone to feed off of. Having that live response is very helpful. And also, I feel like there's no downside to it. I say with my fingers crossed. I don't think someone years from now is going to look and try to cancel me.
As long as you're not running for president, you should be okay.
I don't think I'll say anything that could get me canceled, but I feel like words can be manipulated, especially stuff from the internet. You can cut and chop together in ways that make it seem worse than whatever was said. But I don't think that'll be a big deal. I don't plan on running for president or being famous for that matter. So, I just felt like there was no downside to doing it. I felt like it could be a fun experience. And on the off chance that we do get traction, it's definitely going to be a journey.
To follow up on that, I think the point about adventure we've certainly been people through our lives who have either stumbled into or sought out adventure, and podcasting just kind of felt like another way to get out there and experience something.
Yeah, I feel like definitely we've lived in different places, we've experienced different cultures growing up, and I feel like we just have a lot to share. We have lots of opinions on different things, and that's kind of what this is all about, is just getting those opinions out there.
And hopefully making something that's somewhat entertaining in the process.
Yeah, I don't know about that part. We'll see.
I guess the 4 people who find this can let us know if we were entertaining or not.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't been that entertaining right now, but we could... I mean, I feel like this isn't a very entertaining topic.
You're definitely correct, and hopefully we will get into something more interesting.
Right, we're just kind of setting a standard of why we're here, who we think we are.
This is going to be the episode most
Who
people
do you
skip
think you are?
on their adventure into Conversations Over.
See, it'll be interesting having 2 separate audios, right? Because when I'm talking over you, you can cut mine out and just have yours going.
Interesting.
I didn't thought about that until I was just interrupting you.
Yeah, I thought about that. That's why I didn't interrupt you as much as I wanted to when you were making the jokes about being canceled, because I know, having edited that trailer, that it will inevitably get lost, or I will have to build in space for it to be said, and it's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't know. We've been recording for like 25 minutes. I don't think... We've probably got 12 minutes
If that,
of usable material.
Of content.
But yeah, so where's that question going? Hold up. Why don't you ask me a question? I feel kind
Sure.
of offended we haven't asked.
So you agreed to do the podcast, and as you've informed the audience, you agreed once upon a time to do another podcast. That didn't go as well as this one has. Professionally speaking, this one is a little bit further in production than that one ever got. So, why try again?
So I'm just not one to say no very often. I feel like I'd be missing out on something, right? Fear of missing out, FOMO, is a whole nother topic. But I just feel like it's not going to hurt to say yes, right? I'm getting my voice out there, and that's a good thing. But I mean, it's COVID season, so I'm not doing a whole lot. Obviously, I've got lots of schoolwork and stuff. Starting up a job soon, so I'm going to be busy. But I feel like this is kind of just a good way to let off some steam from like the built-up stress that's inevitable that comes along with living life in these times and trying to be a full-time student and work a part-time job.
Certainly. And if nothing else, you get to spend time talking to me, so take that as you will.
Yep, I certainly get to spend hours upon hours laying on my floor talking into a computer.
Hey, I didn't say you had to lay on your floor.
It's where
Let the
I'm
record
comfortable.
state that is not in his contract.
I don't have a contract.
Let the record state he should probably have a contract.
No, I feel like we're living our best lives. We don't need a contract or anything.
In this location that I will not inform the audience of, where we currently reside, legal contracts can be formed verbally. They are binding.
Verbal contracts are legally binding in the state of depression. That is true.
Sorry, what was that last bit?
Oh, I said verbal contracts are legally binding in the state of depression.
That is true, they are.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah, they do. Did you find your question by any chance, or?
Did I find my question? Now that is an interesting way to go about
well,
asking
you said
that.
As the recording will show, you said, where did that question go?
Alright, I feel like we should stop being so meta about this. Like, as the recording, like, we don't need, like, they know this is a recording, we're not talking to them live. right? I feel like we don't have to like, yeah, as it states, as the record shows.
As
Like,
the
we don't
record
need
shows.
to. I don't think that's very important. No, I didn't think about my question at all
Okay.
anymore.
Do you have a new
But
question?
I'm a very stream of conscious type thinker, and um, I come to understand things better verbally, right? I like have to talk myself through it, and that's how I come to understand things. So that'll be a fun hurdle to jump for this podcast because it should feel structured and organized, right? But nothing I do is structured and organized.
And I think that brings an interesting dynamic to this podcast. That it'll be interesting to have you bring a topic to the table and then to hear you change your mind as we go through whatever topic it is we happen to be discussing.
Yeah, I mean, the topics I'll bring to the table are definitely things that I'll be interested in. For instance, the new car, the successor to a long running series that is thought to be possibly the end of the line for the car, right? Like the last model they'll ever update, which is interesting, but I won't get too far into that.
You'll save it for next week.
I'll save it for next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Please don't sue us.
Please
We're
support
not
the
worth
official
anything.
release. Akira Toriyama, please don't be mean to us. We're big fans.
We're huge fans.
Unless I said your name wrong, in which case, fuck you.
I'm gonna cut that last bit out, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Just to save our asses, as they say in the biz.
Yeah, for sure. And then just go ahead and once you're done, make sure you delete the raw file because someone is gonna hack your computer and steal it.
You're probably right. Someone will definitely hack my computer.
All right, back to podcasts.
Yeah, let's
right?
get back to it.
Even if you don't put this part in, like we've talked about. Let's talk about what we plan to accomplish. How is our podcast going to be different than anyone else's podcast, right? Because I feel like obviously there's an endless number of podcasts that are out in the market right now on the internet. It's kind of like the big craze right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like anyone can be a YouTuber, anyone can do podcasts. And so what do you think is going to set this podcast apart? Or do you think it'll just be another cog in the machine of entertainment that people may or may not find?
I guess in the long run, I'm hoping what sets this podcast apart is going to be us. I think having lived with myself and you for quite some time, I find us to be very entertaining people. I find us to be somewhat well articulated and interesting to discuss with. And I think listeners, at least a few listeners, will think similarly, will find us to be, if not entertaining, at least informative and interesting to listen to. I don't know that we'll stay out of the machine of podcasts if we'll avoid being just another blip in an ocean of people talking into computers, but I hope that our approach will set us apart, that discussing with each other, creating a community where discussion is an option, will set us apart. I don't know ultimately if that's true or not, but that's what I hope will happen.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like from the amount of time that I've known you and known myself, especially in these last few years, I find us both rather entertaining. I feel like there's some sort of charisma there that makes us likable. And I'm not trying to get like a big head or anything, but like I think it's true. And I feel like a lot of that will depend on if we get like anecdotal with our podcast or if it's strictly like here's what I think about politics. Like that's gonna be boring. Like
Yeah, no
because
one
I don't
cares.
like politics. And if I don't care, then other people don't care, right? But if it's something that we're passionate about talking about, then I feel like it'll get some traction. And if nothing else, if no one watches this, if no one ever hears this, then at least a few years down the road we can look back at this and be like, wow, what a bunch of silly kids.
Those guys were idiots.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it PG, not say like fucking dumbasses. Like,
right.
It's not needed. It doesn't add anything. I was at a church earlier today, and so I'm still in my no cussing mode.
I have been trying not to curse as much as I do in everyday life. I don't think idiots counts anymore. I think as an adult, there's words that you just say that no one cares that you say, and I think idiot is one of them.
But yeah, and then I feel like there are definitely some words that like should not be said whatsoever.
There are words I will never say with this mouth of mine. And I used to be really good at not cursing at all. You can attest to that, and I can attest to the fact that once upon a time you didn't curse either, but I've gotten worse as years have gone by, and I've been trying to cut down again.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's some times when it doesn't really matter, and especially if you're not using any terms derogatorily, then I feel like it's not a big deal. Like, at this point, it's just such a part of our culture, and like they're just not even really bad words anymore. They're just used for emphasis. Like, I feel like it's not a big deal whatsoever.
I guess we can use this space to attempt to bring the conversation back towards the topic at hand, which is podcast, and particularly this podcast, Conversations Over. We can talk about that a little bit more. What we see happening in the future, how we see the formula working, what we think the formula is.
Right, so basically this whole thing was your idea. Obviously, because my Mercury is in Gemini, I am not a very structured communicator. And I feel like just going with the flow most of the time. But your idea was to try and have some all-encompassing theme throughout each episode, right? And so you came up with the idea of Conversations Over. And so basically what we're going to try and do is come up with a topic at the beginning. At the top of the podcast, we're going to say, welcome to Conversations Over this week, blah, 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 right? Koalas. The wildfires in Australia. Probably nothing that serious. I don't think this is going to be a serious podcast. But we'll pick this all-encompassing theme for the episode, and we're just going to try our best to stay on topic. And just talk about how we feel about it, what we think is important about it. And just try and provide some sort of, awareness. I don't think awareness is the right word. I don't know. I got lost as I was talking. Yeah, but I feel like information should be used loosely because we're not professionals.
Right, certainly not.
I'm not going to be able to talk about anything from a well-educated... Okay, I'm well-educated, but I'm not going to be able to talk about why the sky is blue and give you all the science behind that.
And more importantly, that's not what we're trying to do. Even if we could, that's not the goal.
I feel like a podcast is a space where one can provide their own personal opinions, right? We've listened to lots of people do it. We've listened to people, or I guess I've listened to people do it by themselves, or with a guest. The guest changes every week, or with a co-host. And I just feel like that's a very appealing form of media to be able to just talk about whatever. You don't need to be qualified for it.
Definitely. There's something to be said about feeling like you're in a conversation as opposed to feeling like you're in a lecture hall.
Right. I feel like I'm focusing more on, oh, this is being recorded for blah, blah, like, whatever. I feel like I just need to focus on, like, oh, it's just a conversation with
Right.
me and Armando. That's right, I speak Spanish.
He doesn't speak Spanish.
Get used to it. Hola, ¿cómo está? Bien, ¿y tú?
Más o menos.
Ah, sí, sí.
So
Es
now that you
loco.
pointed out that conversation's over was ultimately my idea, I would like to attest to the fact that I don't think this formula would work the way I envision it working if I were doing this podcast by myself, if I was doing this podcast with another version of myself, or really anyone else. I think the stream of conscious you bring to it is what will ultimately make it what is unique. I think, like I said earlier, it has to be a conversation. It can't feel like a lecture hall. And I hope that
Right.
that's the element you'll bring.
Absolutely, and I feel like I should probably um, just have some sort of like note written down, like topics of conversation, just so I can be like, okay, I need to make sure I hit these marks,
Hmm.
just so like something to bring myself back because I'll just get off on a tangent and I'll just go.
And for the episodes you lead, I mean, I imagine you'll have that, and I'll lean on you a little bit more for that when we get there. Um, so to move on a little bit, conversation's over. The podcast someone is listening to right now. Um, what do you think is going to happen down the line? Do you see us continuing the way we are setting out? Do you expect guests to appear? Do you think we'll make it to episode 2 even?
I feel like we're definitely gonna make it to episode 2, right? Just because even if no one else listens, it's just kind of nice to get our voices out there, and we talk all the time anyways, so why not record the conversations? As far as guests go, I don't know of anyone that I could like. Obviously, we don't know anyone famous, right? So any guest we have on would just be a personal friend of ours or a
Sure.
family member. And that's not to say that they don't bring valid opinions and experience to the table. For instance, one of my friends is going to school to become a movie director, a movie producer. I'm not going to dox him by saying his name or anything,
I'm sure he
but
appreciates that.
he has lots of opinions on different things. He's very opinionated, and I love to listen to him just go off on tangents about movies, especially. That's like his area of expertise. It's what he's passionate about. And so, I mean, if we ever decide to talk about movies, I mean, I could ask, but I haven't told him we're doing a podcast because this is a secret. So
That's
I could
fair.
just secretly record one of our conversations and put it on the internet. He'd
Hmm.
be okay with it for sure.
Oh, if you found it.
Well, if he finds it, then we'll fight, and I am confident I could beat him in a fight. So it's okay.
Do you want that left in the final cut?
He'll know who he is, so it's cool. If he
That's
ever
why.
hears this, he'll know. It's
Okay.
fine.
Is he already confident in the idea that you'd beat him in a fight?
Oh, does he think he would beat me in a fight, or does
No,
he
no.
think I would beat
Does
him
he
in a fight?
know that he'd lose?
I definitely, most definitely.
Right. I feel like I've got those friends who might talk a lot of game, but when it comes down to it, they know that they'd ultimately lose.
I feel like there's not a lot of fights that I wouldn't win, especially within my friend group.
That's cocky.
No, that's confidence. There's a difference. It's a fine
Hmm.
line. This is well thought out. This is premeditated, right?
Oh,
I've
like murder.
Well, no, don't. That'll get me in trouble. I'm not friends with anyone I don't think I could beat in a fight.
Are you
That's not
saying
true.
you purposely seek out people who are inferior to make yourself feel bigger, stronger?
Yeah, it's some sort of Napoleon complex, I feel like.
Mm.
But
Dynamite?
no, yeah. In all reality, that's not true. Obviously, I have friends that could kick my butt, but not a lot of them. You can quote me on that.
I will quote you on
2020.
that. Thank you for
Good.
your time, Mr. President.
Hey. Not yet. We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
2037. Not even an
All right, here's
election.
a podcast question for you, just to bring it back a little bit. What inspired you to make a podcast? Obviously, you must have listened to podcasts to get this idea, right? You didn't out of nowhere, out of the blue, come up with the idea of recording your audio and putting it on the internet. Clearly, you heard another podcast. So, were there any specific podcasts that you were like, I kind of like what they're doing. I kind of like the medium here. Maybe I should give it a shot.
You make a good point. I didn't reinvent the wheel. I was inspired by several other podcasts. And I think ultimately I was inspired a lot by friends who, I sarcastically or not, have said, oh, you have a lot of opinions. You like to express them. Why don't you have a podcast? And while some of them were certainly joking, I think some of them were sincere. And I was like, you know what, why not give it a shot? Obviously, I listen to quite a few podcasts, but I guess that the ultimate crux in really setting out to do conversations over, one of the podcasts I listen to every week while I was at work, it ended kind of suddenly, and I was like, well, suddenly I don't have a podcast to fill this space, and so many other people have a space where they used to have a podcast. And I thought, maybe if just one of them thinks, hey, this conversation's over, that sounds neat, maybe that'll be my new podcast. It'll help fill that gap a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. She's just seeing that hole in the market and wanting to fill it, whether it was through altruistic reasons or through like a business standpoint of seeing the market and trying to close that gap. That makes a lot of sense, and I feel like it might have been a smart move to not specifically be like, oh yeah, I listened to this podcast, because then people could like come to just these ideas of who we are based on what we listen to or whatever. But you used a big word in there, and I wasn't sure what it meant.
What big word did I use?
Crux.
Oh, like the catalyst, sort of the launching point,
Gotcha.
the final straw that broke the camel's back.
See, I know the word catalyst because my knowledge is scientifically
Science-based,
based.
yes.
That's a big thing in there. It's beautiful out today. How's it up there?
It is lovely out. It's been 60, 65, I think, all day.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my friends to go out, have like a bit of a barbecue, but I think they want sushi.
You can't barbecue sushi, that's the thing.
You can't, or you can?
You can't, not reasonably. With that said, I won't mention the name of the place, but a sushi area around us did make a fried chicken sushi roll. It was quite good.
Oh, that was so good.
So you can sushi barbecue, but I don't think
I don't even remember where that was. You'll have to tell me. You'll have to tell me later where that was. I know it was back home, but I mean that gives two options really. So
yes, it
that's
does.
Whatever. But there's actually a really good sushi place just down the road from where I currently reside, and that's where we're going. Burrito? No, but there's a place downtown that makes sushi burritos, and I want to go.
I don't know how. I feel like ultimately, sushi burritos are sacrilegious in a way, in that you're supposed to eat sushi in one bite, and you can't do that with a sushi burrito.
See, but that's the thing, right? It's not a sushi roll, it's a sushi burrito. And the idea of sushi and sashimi isn't always to be eaten in one bite. For instance, I had a sushi bowl the other day, right? And so it was just like the ingredients that would usually be in sushi. I think I had the poke bowl. So it was tuna poke. Super good. But it's like in a bowl, like a protein bowl, like a burrito bowl. And so I feel like as Americans do, we're making like a fusion dish, right? Where we take someone else's idea and we I don't want to say improve upon it, but we change it and we adapt it to better suit our needs.
We alter it.
Yes.
We hem the pants, the proverbial pants of sushi, into burrito form.
Yep, for sure. And while that's not where I'm going today, that is definitely somewhere that I'm going to go eventually, and I will let you know how it is.
I appreciate that. Do you have anything more to say about podcasts?
I don't know. I feel like we could definitely do an update video. I keep saying like watch and like calling this a video, but that's not the case, right? It's just audio. No one's ever going to see what we look like. But we could do an update episode later and talk about our experiences with the podcasts, you know? Mm-hmm. But I feel like we definitely, for future episodes, need to come in a bit more prepared and have talking points that we want to hit just to make sure we're getting stuff covered and we're not talking in circles.
I think that's fair. I also think this episode really was supposed to just serve a certain purpose. I think we've served that purpose to our own ends. We've established what we want this podcast to be at the very least.
Right.
We can talk about the types of podcasts, the podcast platforms, the history. If you really want to hear about it, I'll tell you about it.
I mean, you're the expert here, right? So
armchair expert.
So I mean, it's up to you if you want to talk about like the boring part of it. Like, I feel like the idea here was to just kind of introduce ourselves and why we're doing a podcast, and I feel like we kind of hit the nail on the head in that aspect.
I think you're right. I will throw in that podcasts have a really extensive, really interesting in a lot of weird ways history, full of really unexpected points where it kind of originates as an audio format specifically intended for iPod use, which is very interesting because iPods are obsolete at this point.
Apple had the lowdown.
No, it was just the iPod happened to be the most popular MP3 player at the time. And the idea
so
of the podcast was to take media that was already being uploaded online or on radio station websites and to be able to file it into your MP3 player and in a playable format. So it was eventually made. I think the app that did it originally was called iPodder, Podder, in 2004.
Not like Harry Potter.
No. And
okay, that would definitely be a topic for conversation later.
That was the intended app, was the iPod, which is now obsolete. And then one of the guys who helped kind of start podcast.
All right, I feel like things are definitely slowing down over here.
Went on to create a Google Analytic to
you have any last
determine how many
minute
times podcast
topics you want to
and once it made it to
bring
100,000 monthly, I believe, he bought up all the podcast domains on the internet. Podcast.net, podcast.com. Just took them all.
Really?
Yeah.
So is a podcast kind of like a Band-Aid or like a jacuzzi, where it's like a more specific name, like a brand name almost, for something with a more general idea, and people just all call them a podcast?
Originally, the podcast, there were air quotes on that word. That was the reason for that particular intonation. The podcast was just the audio form. I think we've come to expect a certain type of thing from podcasts. We expect a host, maybe a topic, a certain length even, and that's not how it started. It's not a brand name in any way. That was the thing. They wanted it to be sort of a format, but
gotcha.
The guy who bought up all those domains, I think he did try to copyright the phrase itself, but I don't think that ever went through.
Gotcha.
Podcasts are also... Sorry, I was trying not to cough there. They're not subject to certain broadcast rules, which is very interesting.
So you can basically say whatever you want?
Sort of.
No one's going to come down on you for it?
You're subject to the terms and conditions of whatever site you're trying to use.
Right.
For posting. But the FCC is not involved. So certain words, the bad ones, as they've been as they're referred to, that you can't use on the radio, you can use here on podcasts, and you hear people use quite often on podcasts. Also, radio is subject to topic specific rules. Like there's adult themed things that cannot be discussed on radio.
Like taxes.
Yeah, just like taxes. If you mention taxes on the radio, you're immediately fired.
But see, I can talk all about my my I-9 forms here if I wanted to.
You shouldn't, because those are very personal. But yes, you
but
could.
I could, and that's the freedom that we love.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of freedom, space is a free place, right? You understand this? As someone who cares about space.
I care more about the ocean than space, but I feel like I see where you're coming from. Continue.
So no one country or private sector can make a claim at anything off the surface of the planet, off of Earth, off limits.
Right.
Not anymore.
What?
Russia
is this the next time on
declared
Dragon Ball Z?
A Russian planet.
Really? Why?
Today.
What gives them the right?
Well, ultimately what gives them the right is they're Russia. Essentially, life was supposedly found on Venus, and
yes,
the Russian chief of space exploration, his name is in front of me, Dmitry Rogozin, claimed Venus a Russian planet. All of this is coming from dailymail.co, so take that as you will. It is backed up in a lot of other places, but obviously with this claim coming out all of 3 hours
yeah,
ago.
I definitely heard about they found life like in a cloud on Venus.
Mm-hmm.
Or like signs of life, not specifically life.
Scientific publications on it quite yet.
Right. Alright, that being said, I do have to get off here. I've got other stuff to do. So, I feel like this is a good launching point. I feel like we're getting ourselves out there, right? Out of our comfort zones a little bit, and that's what's important. And if you listened all the way through, congrats, you made it. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for joining us on this adventure. Hi, Mom and Dad. I don't know if that'll make it into the final cut, but I'm certainly saying it because I expect both of you to listen. If you don't, I will not be super happy. I'll be.
Yeah, if you don't listen to this, I'm not coming to Thanksgiving, guys.
That's not true. He's coming to Thanksgiving because it's free food.
I need the free food. I lied to you.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for listening. Hopefully, we'll see you again next week, and you've enjoyed at least a little bit everything we've said. Let us know, I guess, through social media. I don't know if this will have a comment section. Obviously, we're new to the program. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you have any topic ideas, any guest ideas. I'm working on Barack Obama, but I don't think he'll make it.
No, okay, I got Michelle's number, so we can talk about that.
Okay.
But definitely, if anyone hears this and they want to hear our opinions on something, right? Obviously, no politics, no religion. But if there's something out there and you want us to have a conversation over it, let us know.
Yeah, we want to hear from you, the people.
In order to form a more perfect union.
Thanks for coming on this auditory journey with us. And
hopefully they're saying.
this has been Conversations Over.